Start with the acknowledgement of country. We acknowledge this land that we meet on today is the traditional lands for Kaurna people and that we respect their spiritual relationship with their country. We also acknowledge the Kaurna people as the custodians of the Adelaide region and that their cultural and heritage beliefs are as important to the living Kaurna people today. We also pay respects to the cultural authority of Aboriginal people visiting or attending from other areas of South Australia and Australia present here. So this session today is on Microsoft Forms. Before we dive in, I'll just give people this tip. If you are trying to manage with one screen in this session, the first bit of the session, I'm going to show you some examples of forms, but in the second bit of the session, it's going to be quite hands-on, and we'll be going through and I'll be walking you through creating a form. So if you don't have two screens, you can split your screen by pressing the Windows key if you're on a Windows machine, and the right or the left arrow to split your screen so you can see me and you can work on the form as well. Before we dive in though, I'll just do a quick poll. So polls is a feature of Teams which actually runs off forms. So I just launched this one here. We're a very small group, but if you could just let me know what your role is, that will help me when I talk about the different examples. Also, because I'm running this session and monitoring the chat, if you do have a question in the chat and I don't get to it, please feel free to jump off mute and pipe in. It might just be that I haven't seen it in the chat yet. Okay, and I'll do one more poll before we get going. It looks like we've got a few admin people and then a bit of a mix. But I'll do one more poll just to see how people are in terms of whether they're already familiar and using Teams or whether it's brand new to them. Okay, so most people haven't used it or have just used it a little bit, which is great because that means we can start from the very beginning. You'll find that Forms is really easy to use once you get the hang of it, and it's a really useful application. So I'm going to stop my presentation now and start sharing my screen. Just bear with me while I move my Teams window across. And we can jump in. Okay, so Microsoft Forms is just a web application. It isn't a desktop app. And it can be accessed through the Microsoft website, which is www.office.com, and then it should appear in your list of apps down the side. Or you can get to it directly by going to www.forms.office.com. Now, if you go to it directly through www.forms.office.com, the layout that you get is a little bit different and it's more up to date. So I do suggest that you go to it directly rather than going through office.com. I'm going to start by showing you a few examples of some forms and how they might be used in the classroom. But first of all, one really great thing about forms is that we can share it externally. So students can share it with their community if they're doing a data collection. So for high school students, especially if they're doing their research project, lots of students I know use forms to collect data around that. In the primary curriculum, if you're doing maths, you might get students to create forms so that you've got some data to use in your maths as well. So it can be shared externally, you can create templates, you can collaborate on them, and you can also have forms that belong to you, but also forms down here. You can see I've got lots of groups which are teams and forms that belong to teams. Okay, so a few examples. This one here is an example of a formative quiz. So there's a form or quizzes that you can create, and this formative quiz has something called branching. So here the teachers put in a question with an image. The student can respond, and if they accidentally get the wrong answer, the teachers put in this supporting information. You can see as well, we've got this icon for immersive reader. So if English is not the student's first language or they have difficulty reading, they can also go into immersive reader and hear that question read out. So in this case, the teachers put in some information. The student can then try again, and hopefully they get it right this time, and then they move on to the next question. So that's an example of a form used as a quiz for formative assessment. This one here is an example of a form that a school's created to share with community. In this case, they want people to register if they can volunteer for Grandparents' Day. We've got some required fields, so you can see they've got a dash, an asterisk next to them. That means that the person has to fill them out before they can submit the form. So then we've got some fields here, and then again, can you help on the day? And if you say yes, there's a question saying, what can you do to help? And then the person can submit that form. Okay. Got some more examples here. So another thing you can do with forms is actually embed them in a team. So this is my form example team, and I've got some other examples of how you might use forms with your students. So this one is an example of what a student might create if they're collecting data on something, so they can put together the questions and then give the link to their fellow classmates or other community members to complete, and then they can use the data. Forms do allow you to upload up to 1 gigabyte, which means that if you're wanting to get students to submit large files, you could use a form as a form of assignment submission as well. Note that if you are using the upload option for questions, then it has to be a form that is internal only. It can't be an external form, but I'll go through that a little bit later. You could use a form to help with things such as student representative voting. So forms allows you to upload photos. So this one's an anonymous form, and I could set it up. Oh, this is the back end, but I could set it up so that I get my students to vote for their representatives, and then forms is going to do all that work in the background, working out who got the most votes. The last example I have here is a reading comprehension example. And again, this one here is a quiz. So you can see I've got points assigned and I've got questions or correct answers that I've put in. So as a teacher, I can give this to my students and it's going to self-mark this. So it will take away that extra work I need to do going through people's answers. Now notice when it's a question like this one, which is an open question, I haven't entered an answer for it to match, which means that I still need to do some work in the marking space. But these ones which are multiple choice, it can mark for me. Okay, so there's some examples of how you might use forms. I'm just going to show you another way that forms is really good to help you interpret the data before we get into creating forms ourselves. So I'll just go into a form that I've used in 2021, but it's got lots of responses, so it's a nice one to show what the data looks like. So I'm just going to hop into this one. So this was a registration form for a Microsoft Minecraft training that we ran. And if I go into the response tab, I can see some data really quickly and it's visually presented as well. So 115 responses, it took people 6.5 minutes to complete. I get a nice word cloud there. So obviously primary school was the response that came up the most, but I also get some visual graphics like this pie chart. So most people were coming by themselves. And also if it's a multiple choice question with lots of answers, that data is represented as a bar graph as well. So I've got some nice visuals that help me read the data really quickly. Now, all this is live, so if someone was to respond to this form right now, I would see that data change right in front of my eyes as well. I can as well open this up in Excel, so I'm not restricted to just what Microsoft thinks will be useful, but I can download this and then manipulate the data as well. But that's the back end and that's the responses and how I can see who has filled in my form and what responses they've given me. Okay, so now let's get into the nitty-gritty. So if you haven't already, can you please open up a browser on your computer? And I'll get you to go to www.forms.com. So hopefully you can see, or what you see is similar to what I'm seeing. We've got some options here. A new quiz is the one that you'd pick if you were creating something for your students or your staff and you wanted it to be self-marking. But we're going to start with a new form. So if you click on new, before you do that, there's a relatively new feature, which is a quick import as well, which allows you to upload a PDF or a Word document, and it will do its best to change it into a form for you. So if you have some files already that are worksheet type forms that you might have created, you can give the quick import button a go and it will do its best to change that into a live form for you. Now, if you do use that option, just note that you do have to go in and edit because although it does its best, it's not perfect. But we're today going to click on new form and that's going to open up a brand new form for us. So the first thing we want to do is give it a title. So because this is just a test one today, I'm just going to call it a training test form. And I can also add in a description. So especially if you're using this with community members or students, it's really great if you add a description in so people know what the form's about. This is examples of different questions. Yes. You can also add a picture here as well. We're going to skip that for the moment. Now, there's quite a lot of different question types that you can add in a form. And so if I click new, I'm given a range of different choices. And if I click the arrow down, I've got some more as well. So we're going to go through each of these question types to see what options we have. So if first of all you click on choice, this gives us options. Now let's put in a question. So what is your favorite color? And then if it's a question like that, it's going to give me some AI options. So for in this example, I'm going to do add all. The options it gives you might not be what you want, but sometimes they work out. If you do the add other option, what this does is it gives people the opportunity to have a text box and they can type in a response. So if they like burgundy or something like that, that isn't there as an option, they can add that response themselves. If it's a multiple choice with only one answer, this is what you want it to look like. But if you move this slider across, this gives people the option to click more than one response. You can also say how many they can select. So if it is what's your 2 favorite colors, for example, you could put in there that they need to put in 2 answers. This slide here tells them or tells the computer whether you want them to respond or not. So if it's toggled off, they can submit the form without answering this question. But if you need them to answer this question, you can toggle it on. And then we've got some more options here with these 3 dots as well. So you can shuffle those options around. That means that for each person that opens the form, the questions or the answers, the options aren't going to be in the same order. So that's handy if you're doing quizzes, for example. It stops students just ticking the top box because they saw their friend tick the top box. You can add a subtitle in here. So that allows you to add some extra information in here. So it might be pick the top 2 from this list. You might add in. And then branching means that you can choose, if they select one of these, what question it takes them to next. So we go back to branching a little bit later. Now, once I've got it in here, I'm actually going to go to this preview button here, and this is going to show me what this looks like for my person that's going to submit the form. So here it is. It's got my name there, so that automatically tells me that at the moment this form is not anonymous and it's collecting my data. It knows who I am if I'm filling this in. And when we go into the settings, I'll show you how you can change that if you need to. And then you can see here, or it's told me I've got to select 2 because I put that restriction on, so it won't let me click other. But if I've clicked 1, I could put in here rainbow, and then when I submit that, this is a new feature as well, so I could save my response if I want to go back in and change it. So that's a relative new feature, but it means if I've got a long form or if I'm doing a quiz with my students and I need them to go back, I can do that now. Okay, but I'm going to click on the back button now, and I'm back in my editing window for my form. So that's the choice. Let's go on to the next one. So if we click add new now, let's do our text. So with text questions, we've got short answer. Now you see it's got subtitle here. That's because I had subtitle in the previous question, but I can turn that off for this question if I'd like. So the default is short. So I could put in here, what are you having for dinner? And that would be a 1 or 2 word answer. If I toggle this one on, I've got more flexibility, so they can give me a paragraph answer, for example. Again, because the question above was required, it's got the default on as required, but maybe I don't need my people to tell me what they're having for dinner. So this question is required with the asterisks and this one is not. So that's short answered. And again, I've got some restrictions. So if I need them to put in a number, for example, I can limit what numbers they can put in. So it might be how many people are coming to dinner, and you might have a limit that it has to be greater than or equal to 5 or something like that. Okay, again, if you want to see what this looks like, you can click on the preview button, and now I can see I've got my first question that's required and my second question that isn't. Are there any questions so far? Just give me a thumbs up if you're following along okay. Perfect, we got a few thumbs up. Just wait, because it looks like Amanda might be typing in a question. Okay, feel free to come off mute as well if you do want to jump in with a question. Okay, again, I'm going to click on the back and I'm going to move on to the next question type. So if I click add new now, the next one is a rating. So this one here is if you want to give get people to rate something, obviously. So how good was your day? You can choose what the rating is out of. So it can be from 2 to 10. You can choose what symbol you use. And then you can also add a label. So you could put heart 1 was terrible. And then heart 10 was the best day ever, for example. And again, you can add a subtitle if you need to in here. This time I'm not going to go into the preview, I'm just going to move on to the next question type as well. So again, we're going to click on add new. And the next one is date. So date is basically just a date picker. So this is really useful if you're asking people if they can help and what day they can help, or if you want people to pick their date of birth, for example. So what is the day tomorrow? And again, I can make it required. I can add watching, I can add a question. I will go to preview this one. I'll click on preview again. And you'll see I can type in a date, or I can just pick the date as well there. Okay, so let's go back. And the next type of question is a ranking. So this one here allows people to order things from top to bottom. So what can we say? What is the best day of the week? It might give me some options. Monday. No, it isn't. If I want to add options, I can just click add options. If I've clicked too many options in here, I can just use the bin to delete those options as well. Again, I can do it as required, and I can do the shuffle options for this type of question as well to again avoid people looking at what their neighbour did and organising them the same way, because each person that opens the quiz will have them in a different order. Okay, so the next one is the Leichhardt, which is that lovely grid where you can put in your statements. So my favorite person is Tom Kelly. Probably wouldn't use this with students, but here we go, Sam. And I can then delete these options. The person who makes me laugh the most, etc. And I can add more statements. The person I sit next to. And again, for this one, people can then click a response according to their opinion. Okay, so the next type is a little bit, the next type is upload file. We're going to put this question in and then we're going to delete it after, because I want to show you how you can share these. And remember, I mentioned very briefly in the beginning that if you use the upload file question, you can only share this with people within the department. So that's anybody with an @schools email address. So that's either students or staff. So here we're going to say, please upload a photo of your favorite animal. I can choose how many files. So if it's their favorite, I just want one. I can choose the file size limit. So again, 1 GB is the highest. If I go into here, I can select file type. And because here I've set a photo, I don't want them to do a Word or an Excel or a PowerPoint or a PDF. I just want an image. I don't want videos and I don't want audio. So I can restrict what type of file they can upload. So if I go add new now, I think we've just got one left, which is again a bit of a strange one. This one here is kind of like a scientific method for judging whether people are liking something or disliking something, and it gives you a score that tells you the promoters, the distractors, and then how they compare against each other to whether it's a good idea or not. So let's just use this example that they pre-populate, and this will get people to give a scale, but it measures it differently to how the ranking is measured. Okay, so the last one in here is a section. Sections are just there to break up your form or your quiz. So if I have a quiz that has 20 questions, for example, I might want to break it up into 4 different sections with 5 questions in each. So this one might be favorite activities. And then I can add more questions in here. or I might want to move this one down into my second section. So when I open the form up, let's go to preview again. I've got my first section, and then if I click next, well, it won't let me because I've got some required ones. So let's just do the required ones quickly. And I've got one more required up here. So now if I click next, it's taken me to that second section. So it allows me to break the form up. Okay, so let's go back, and we've gone through all of the question types. So now we're going to have a look at editing and branching. So I've got my questions, but say I made a mistake. I didn't want to say how good was your day. I can just click in there. I can edit it. If I made a mistake and I don't need this question anymore, so I will get you to delete this upload file question. I can do that by clicking on the rubbish bin, and it would check that I do want to delete it, and I'm going to say yes. If I've got two questions that are quite similar, I can go in and copy that question. So then I could change this to worst. So that allows me to save time as well. Also with the choice questions up here, I'm just going to change it off multiple answers, because then I can do a drop down instead. And also if I want to add lots of options in here, I can copy and paste from an Excel spreadsheet into one option, and it will create options according to how much I've copied in. Now just note that with these, there is a limit on how many responses you can add into a question. So you can't add 1,000 different things that people can pick from. So there is a limit there. Okay, now the last thing to mention is the branching. So this is a multiple choice. If I click here, or if I go to any question and click add branching, this opens up the branching option menu. And then this allows me to choose a pathway that people are going to take depending on what they respond to questions. So for example, if I get someone picking green, I might not want them to respond to what you're having for dinner. I might want them to go straight to how good was your day. If they pick red, maybe I don't want them to answer any more questions and just go to the end of the form. If they pick purple, I might want them to do the having dinner, etc. So you can really tailor what the choose your own adventure type thing corresponds to their question choices. Note that not all options give us a different response depending on how they order. So this one here, it doesn't order it. Whatever they do, the next question they go to is going to be the one I select. Same with this type of question. So it's only the choice questions where you can choose to direct them to a particular question. But if I've directed them to dinner, then the next question might be end of form, for example. So that's branching. The other thing to notice or to remember with branching is that if I then put in another question somewhere in here, and this question at the moment is next, if I don't want them to go to the question I've just put in, I have to go in and change this next to a different option in there. So just remember, if you are using branching and you add questions or change the order, you're going to need to go in and check that the branching still corresponds with what you want. So this is really handy, especially if you're using it for formative assessment, like that telling time example I showed in the beginning, or if you've got a form that you want to change according to people's responses, like the grandparents one, where if they weren't able to volunteer, you didn't need to ask them what they were going to do or when they could help. Okay, so let's go back again. And we're now going to explore how you can make the form a bit more pretty, because this is the standard, but you might want to change it up a bit. And you can do that by going to styles. So in styles, you've got a whole range of options. There's a whole lot that Microsoft thinks will fit in with what you've got. So depending on what you write in for your title will depend on what you see here. There's a few ones that are, you see it's got a play button, they're immersive and they move. There's some that aren't. You can add background music if you want to, although in a class that might not be the best thing to do. And you can also, if you click the plus, upload your own photo. So if you've got something in OneDrive or on your computer, you can upload it, or you can choose a color theme as well. So if you've got particular school colors, you could add that hex key. So for this example, if I want to add the department colors, I could add that hex, and I'll just put that hex into the chat in case you want to see what happens when I do that as well. So now if I go to so now I can add that in and it will change my form again. So let's ignore that and go to a picture. And again, if I now go to preview, it shows me what that looks like. So start now, and you can see it's got that background image, and it's changed the look of the form. Now, because I've got branching, that's why it had that I had to pick something before it gave me the next question. Okay, let's go back. So that's changing the look and feel. There's some other things that are quite important to know about, and they're in the settings, and the settings can be reached by those 3 dots in the top right. Now, if you want to have multiple people working on that same form, so say you want someone to edit, check that your spelling's all correct or that the wording makes sense, you can click on this collaborate or duplicate. And if you click here, you can add, or you can copy that link and send that to people within the department who'd like to work on the form with you. If you're wanting to duplicate the form, or the quiz, so if you're all Year 9 teachers teaching maths, you've got a form that you want all your Year 9 students to complete, but I don't want to know what Mr. Smith's class is doing. I don't want all that data in my form. I could get the link to duplicate. So he has the exact same form as me, but he uses that for his students. I use my one for my students, and we get separate data for our classes. So that's the share as a template. In the settings, I've got some flexibility here. So if I want people outside of the department to be able to share or access or fill in this form, I click anyone can respond, and this makes it anonymous automatically. So if you are wanting to collect things like people's names or people's email addresses from outside the department, just remember to include a question in here that's required that says, please give your contact details or give your email address or what's your name. If it's a form that you want to share with just people inside the department, so that's students or staff, you can make the form anonymous if you untick the record the name, or if you want to collect that data, so the person's email address and their name, keep that box ticked. People will know if it is not anonymous because their name will appear up here. And you can also say if you want only one response per person. So that's quite handy as well if you want to make sure that people don't resubmit the same form. The other option is specific people can respond. So if you only want this form to be filled out by the members of the maths faculty, for example, you can click on there and then you can add them in when you go to collect the responses. But let's keep it with only people in my organisation can respond. And then we've got some other options in here as well. So I can turn the form off by unticking this. So if I've created something and then it's not quite ready for people to be able to use, if I untick that box there, I can give a message. So this form opens on the 4th. Please that later, for example. And then if people have the link already, when they click on there, they see that message. I can set a start date, so I can set it to start after a particular date and time. I can set an end date, which means that people won't be able to submit the form after that end date. I can set a time. So this is particularly good if you're doing quizzes. So I can say you've only got 30 minutes to complete this, so that when the time is up, the form is submitted automatically. I can shuffle the questions. So this here doesn't work for this particular form because I've got branching. You can see that icon there tells me I've got branching. But if you don't have branching, this option here means that question 1 might be different for everybody. So this is different from shuffle answers. This means that the order the questions appear on the form is different for everybody, rather than the order of the options being different. And then I can have a show progress bar, which is really handy if you've got lots of questions in there as well. It will just show people how much or how far they are through the form or the quiz. So I've only got one response, so I'll untick that. So if I want people to submit multiple ones, or I don't, but I'm allowing them to, I can hide the submit another response. And I can also put a customized thank you message in here. So it could be, thanks, your response was submitted, any questions, and you could add an email address or something like that. And then this one is a new option as well. So after, if you allow respondents to save their responses, you can also, after they've submitted it, allow them to go back and resubmit and change their answers. So this is a fairly new feature of forms. You didn't used to be able to do that. And it's worth remembering that that's a setting from the 3 dots and the settings. And then the last 2 things in the settings is that this one here will send an email to the person that put in the form to let them know that their form's been received, and the person that created the form can get an email. That's fine, Rachel. Let me know if you watch the recording. Okay, so in here as well, multilingual is okay if you are able to provide your own translation. It doesn't do the translation yourself. Print form isn't that nice, so it is really geared up to be filled out online. It is responsive, so if you've got people filling it out on their mobile phone, the layout of the form will change. This present is a new feature as well. So this allows you, if I click present, it allows you to have this up on your screen, and it will show you in real time, a bit like a poll, if people are filling this out, what the different responses are. So this is handy if you're using it with your class, for example. You can have the responses for the whole form up on the screen. So that's a fairly new feature as well. Okay, so we've created the form, we've put in all the questions, we've styled it, we've checked that the settings are correct. Now we want to go ahead and let people know that our form exists and that we'd like them to fill it out. So in order to do that, it's this big green collect response button that we click. And then again, we can select at this point who we want to respond. So again, if it's external, you need to click that top one. We're going to keep it with only people from the department. And then you've got a range of options for sharing that. So you can just copy the link. You can email it directly to people. You can create a QR code and download that. So that's handy if you want it on tables, for example, or you can embed it. So you can copy this, and then, for example, you could embed a form in a Sway if you're using Sway for newsletters, for example, or if you've got a feedback form on your school website or something like that, you can embed the form as an iframe by clicking copy. So that's how you share the form. And that brings us into the data and responses. So I've already gone through that a little bit when I talked about the Minecraft one. I might go into this in a little bit more detail, and then we quickly move on to quizzes before we finish off this session today. So this is the back end. If I click on view results, this takes me through one by one how the different people answered. From here as well, if I click on the three dots, I could delete the response or print the response. So that's individual responses. That's really handy if you've got someone that's accidentally submitted the form twice. You can go in through the free view results and delete the duplicate response. If I go to the three dots here, I can actually delete all responses if I want. So if I've collected all the responses, downloaded them, I want to use the form again, but I don't want that historic data, I can delete all responses and that will wipe them, and you can start from scratch. I can share a summary link. So the summary is what we see here, that visual representation. So if I've got to share this data with more than one person, they might not need to see all the detailed data in the back end. They might just want a quick snapshot. And if I click on share summary link and send them that link, they can see this overall summary. They don't have access to the form. They can't change the back end of the form, but they can see the data and the results. Sync all responses to a new workbook. So this form here is in a team, which means that the data lives inside the team. But I might, for some reason, want to have it go into a new Excel spreadsheet. So that's what this one is about. Okay, so let's have a quick dive into quizzes to finish off. So I'm going to click back into forms. And this time I'm going to create a new quiz. Before I do, you'll see here my training test form. That's the one I just created, as popped up as the first tile. If you don't see the form that you need to see here, there's the show more, which you can click on to see your forms. If it's a form that belongs to a group, for example, I'm just going to do show more and go into my tech adoption group. You can get to those forms down here. So you can see that Microsoft one, the Minecraft one that I've been going in, lives in this team. Why might you want to change a form and put it into a team? If it's in a team, that means that everybody in that team can access the back end and the data. And again, that's not on the summary, but I'll quickly show you how to do that. Whoops, let's go back. So there's 3 dots if I hover over, and then I can do move to a group, and that allows me to select a team that I belong to and move that form to that team as well. If you are doing that, we do suggest that you get the form all correct and ready before you move it across. You can also as well from here copy it. So if you need to make a duplicate, you can copy it from here. And if there's forms that you use all the time, you can favorite them as well from here. Okay, right, let's go into the new quiz. And we have to be very quick because we've almost run out of time. So again, quizzes are a little bit different because you can do self-marking. So example quiz. If I do add new, I've got the same range of different question choices. Just going to click on choice. I've got this option of maths. Now this then allows me to enter equations. So x 4 times 5 equals okay. And if I do use the maths, it's really nice because it gives me a whole range of different options that might be possible and the answer. So we can add that, and the question might be solve the equation below. So maths is a new one that you don't see in forms, but you see in quizzes. And you can say that that is the correct one. You can also add feedback. So if people select this one, you can give them a message like, well done. Whoops. Let's try again. Well done. And if you do that, you could give them some help. Remember to do the inverse operation on the other side of the course. So you can give students that real quick feedback when they answer the questions incorrectly or correctly. There are a couple of different settings in a quiz as well. So in the quiz here, where is it? Sorry, oh yes, it's show results automatically. So if it is a summative test and you don't want students to know what they got, you need to toggle that off. But if it's formative, you might want to toggle that on, and it might be important that they only have one response per person in this case, and you might not want them to be able to edit their responses. But if it's a long quiz or test, you might want them to save it as well. So that's very, very quickly our quizzes and a couple of the differences between our quizzes as well. If you do choose a text one as well, and you add answer, it does add an answer. It does allow you to add several different options And if the student puts it in without a capital letter, for example, you can put in an option with a capital letter, without a capital letter, so it still marks them as correct as well. Okay, any questions before I move on to the last bit, which is just where you might go for more help? No, you're all right, David? Yep, Amanda, you're okay at the moment? Perfect. Okay, so the last bit is just a couple of places you can go if you want some further information on using forms. So one place you can check out is our YouTube channel. So I'll just pop that into the chat. David, you've already got these links, I'm sure. But we have a playlist around forms. Let's get it from here. So there's a whole, let's try again. There's a whole range of different tutorials that you can go through. Most of them are quite short. Some of them are a bit longer. So there's a whole amazing use of forms that you can link to with something called Power Automate to do all sorts of automated things for you, like send out emails or update lists and all sorts of things. So if you see Power Automate, these ones are likely to be a bit longer because they're taking you through a complex process. But other than that, there's lots of short ones that you can have a look at in case you want to revise how to do something quickly. The Educator Centre is another great place to go. This is a Microsoft website. We do encourage you to create a profile and use your @schools email address, and then you can track your process and you can progress, and you can download certificates to prove that for your teacher's registration as well. And there's a whole lot of learning paths in here to do with forms as well. So you can see if I drew in here, K-12 educator, there's how to use forms for assessment, and yeah, there's a few things that will help you use forms in your teaching.